I'm Meredith Schwartz, the executive editor of Library Journal, and this is What the City Needs from the Library, or Ask Not What the City Can Do for You. And as we know from the famous quote, it's but what you can do for your city. We're not really saying you should stop asking what the city can do for you, but the point of this panel is to talk about the role that libraries can and should, and that librarians can and should play in participating in larger citywide goals, missions, and initiatives. And when we say city, we mean all kinds of towns. We don't mean urban locations. Ask not what the city, county, borough, or township can do for you did not have quite the same ring to it. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. Next to me, I have Mike D., who assures me I do not have to pronounce his last name, who is joining us from the city government of Philadelphia and is therefore uniquely well placed to tell us what the library can do for the city. Next, we have a little-known gentleman known as Brian Bannon, the director of the Chicago Public Library. And next to him, we have Andrea Blackman, the director of the Civil Rights Room at Nashville Public Library, who can tell us about their ambitious collaboration with the local and state police. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to the panelists, and we'll talk later about questions and interaction between the panel.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm going to stand. I told Meredith I'd stand. She said it was okay. So I'm Mike DeBerardinis. Pardon?
I'm not sure your mic is on.
Yeah, I think it's on,
Okay.
right? Yes. I'll get it a little closer here.
Thanks.
I'm Mike DeBerardinis. I'm the managing director of the city of Philadelphia. And the job, or the office that I lead, has all the major city departments reporting into it through deputies. So there's about 90% of our 26,000 person workforce reports into my office, with police, fire, streets, water, L&I, library, parks and recreation, pretty much the big operational functions of government. And prior to that job, I was the deputy mayor who had parks and rec and library report into me. So I've been connected to the Philadelphia library system and its leadership, and Siobhan for those 10 years or so, 8 or 10 years or so. So I know a little bit about the library, not a lot, but I know enough to get myself into trouble from time to time. But the question, right? Ask not what the city can do for you, but what can you do for your city? And I think vice versa. I don't know about the rest of you, the way you guys are structured, but in Philadelphia, the library is a unique vehicle. They're an operating department, but they're not. They still have a trustee board that hires the director, but their overwhelmingly, the majority of their operating dollars come from the city government. So I tell them they're equivalent to the Vatican. They're an independent state within a sovereign nation, and that's the best example I have of the relationship. And believe me, I lived through it for like 8 or 10 years, and it's a good leadership helps you navigate through that pretty easily. But without good leadership, it can be a real mess. And Siobhan's leadership and her executive staff have been wonderful, and we've had a great relationship in the last administration and in this one. I think when you try to get around this question, I think about the library's like the library science and the role of libraries in America is about opportunity. It's about leveling the playing field. It's about equity. It's about equal access to knowledge and to information. And I think in this administration, and I think in the last one as well, we had a heavy focus on equity. We had a heavy focus on reducing poverty. We had a heavy focus on opportunity and fairness as the driving values of policy, the driving values of service. And when you think about those values as primary values in administration and the historic values of libraries and the role they've played in the life of America, there's a pretty good fit. There's a natural fit. And the trick is trying to find how these systems can support the policy objectives of the administration as they meet their historic mission. So I think that's the sweet spot of the work. And this library has done an amazing job. I'll just give you a few examples. We have a campaign, Read by Fourth, literacy. We want all Philadelphia children to be reading at grade level by the 4th grade. Who's the center of that campaign? You would think it's the school district, right? No, it's the library. You talk about workforce. We're trying to build a workforce strategy for the entire city government and for the city as a whole. And one of the lead agencies, we have City as Model Employer, and trying to bring seasonal workers, opportunity youth, returning citizens, incumbent workers into civil service jobs that have a little lift to them. One of the key operating departments in that work is the free library. We have a $500 million investment program in our infrastructure. 1/3 of that money, guess where it's gone? It's gone to the neighborhood branches of the city, of this library system in the city of Philadelphia. The remaining pieces go to park and recreation centers, neighborhood parks, playgrounds, recreation centers across the city. The library is an integral part of that work. So when you look at trying to create fair and equitable cities, which I think is sort of the promise and the challenge of American cities today, and that is, how do we succeed in building opportunity, fairness, and equity in American life? How do we hold on to these long-term democratic values that are under attack right now? How do we hold on to them but work them to a point where they have real value, real economic and social value, and value around sustainability and environmental sustainability? How do we do that? I think here in Philadelphia, we are taking the challenge and trying to build our success around equity and fairness as the with the Philadelphia Free Library as our primary partner. So that's my story. I'm sticking with it. But that's about all I have to say. Hopefully, we'll have some time to chat as this little panel goes along.
We should do.
Is this thing on? Oh yeah, great. So I'm just going to click through these few slides here. So in preparation for this, first of all, I want to thank Library Journal and Meredith and Siobhan. It's so fun to be in Philadelphia. Philadelphia should be really proud of its public libraries here, and we often are borrowing ideas and insights from all of you in the room, but particularly this library. So it's fun to be here and to see it all coming to life. When we were preparing for this, I think one of the things you'd asked me to do is to think about some of the different collaborations that we work on in libraries to help pursue our mission in new and creative ways. And so I wanted to start with this sort of the way that we think about collaboration, which I think is probably how most of you think about it. So I'm probably not going to say anything new or new for you all. But when we think about collaboration, it really is in our DNA. It's a lot of how we get our work done through libraries. What we found actually is that everybody wants to work with us in some way, which is really exciting. So it's neighborhood groups, city groups. I think the fact that we have a library in every neighborhood in our city, many organizations, particularly those who are wanting to impact the whole city, see the library as an artery to be to help reach all of our city. And so it's a great asset for us. It also means that there's a responsibility for us to think about how do we best leverage our brand, our relationships, our network into our neighborhoods when we think about collaboration. And so part of the way that we've sort of laid this out for us is that when we look at new partnerships, or even frankly when we do inventory of existing ones, we first think about is the collaboration or is the partner allowing us to do something that we can't really do on our own? Is there something unique about them? Are they allowing us to reach an audience that we otherwise would have difficulty reaching? So that's a really important filter for us when we think about collaboration. Another one, which I think is a really important one for us in libraries, is that we are among the most trusted institutions out there. I think this isn't a surprise to all of you in the room. We're librarians, but there's a reason for that, and we have a really strong and recognizable brand. We're an organization of caring people that are providing really important services, and this is not just in Chicago, but around the country. So when we think, one of the other filters is, are we going to partner up with an organization that has a brand and reputation that really that can stand alongside our own? And that's not really more like an egotistical thing. It's really more like, hey, if we're going to put our library brand next to somebody else's, like, who are they? What do they stand for? And do we want to lean into that collaboration with them? Another question that we ask is do we frankly have the capacity to do it? So, I mean, so many times people come to us and say, hey, we really got this great idea, and every idea always just sounds, so fun at the sort of the planning table, but then all the questions of like, well, who's going to implement it? Do we have the resources to do it? Are we going to, is this really something that we can do and do well? And so it's always something that we spend a lot of time thinking about, because if we want to lean in and really leverage our organization and our brand, our reputation, we want to make sure that we actually have the capacity to do it well. And I guess one of the other final things that we think about sort of related to the partner is, is this partner, best in class? So that's sort of related to their brand and reputation, but like, can they really deliver too? So in the same way that we want to look at our own capacity, we also want to look at a partner's ability to help deliver. And that really influences or informs sort of how we think about all different ways that we work in our communities across Chicago. And so I want to share a few fun ones. Some of them are really collaborations that are around space. A few collaborations are around program, and then some others that are sort of a combination of each of them. And one of the other things I also want to talk about related to partnerships is that we also partner a lot with other libraries, which I think is really fun for us, and also I think is great for the field. And I know that we heard from the librarian of Congress earlier today, Dr. Carla Hayden, and I think that she really represents sort of that idea that we borrow and share and collaborate as a field, and I think it's one of the things that makes it really special and important to be part of the library space. So one example of a programmatic collaboration is that our city has been looking at ways that we can more deeply engage the entire city in conversations that are important to our current state and our future state. And one of the initiatives that we started a few years ago is called On the Table, and the idea was to just get people to sit around the dinner table or lunch table or sit in a circle on the floor and eat some chips and salsa, that kind of. So really simple idea of just getting people in a room and to talk. And so we realized that the fact that we have 80 libraries, we're in every neighborhood in the city, that we could be a really important convener of these conversations. And so the last few years, what we've done is we've worked with Chicago Community Trust and a lot of other organizations in the city to host thousands and thousands of dinners, lunches, and groups to talk about issues that are important to our city, and then found ways of collecting those ideas and then sharing them more broadly to help build strategies that not just us to the library, but we as a city can implement and use to help make our city stronger. And it's been a really fun way for us to work across the city. Another one, and actually what's cool about this one is it's been so successful in Chicago. There are a number of other libraries we've worked with to help them do them in other cities, and it's been a really effective way to help not only us have conversations in Chicago, but to see other cities doing the same thing. Related is a collaboration to this around getting people to talk, is one called Learning Circles. We worked with a group that was spun out of MIT Media Labs called Peer-to-Peer University, and they were really interested in the question of how people can learn online and realized that maybe perhaps people who were learning online want to just learn on their own, and so they were interested in finding a physical place where people wanted to learn together, and so public libraries became an interesting place for them. So we did a series of prototypes of using massive online courses, things like Python programming, public speaking, and we just did sort of paper flyers to get people to sign up. And what we thought was really interesting is that people who signed up hadn't really done online learning before. So they were learning how to do online learning, but they were doing it in a very neighborhood and localized way. And it's so successful, and in fact, that what we found is that the people who are actually taking these courses, little known fact about online courses, I think it's like 5% of people actually complete them. In our first prototype, 60% people completed the course. None of the folks in our first round of prototypes even had a college degree, and a number of them didn't even have a high school diploma. And so it was really interesting to see, like, these are the folks that we're really wanting to engage in online learning. And what we found is a library is a really powerful platform to do that. And actually, we were successful in securing an IMLS grant to work with a number of other libraries around the country to extend this work and this opportunity. So that's one. This isn't just a fun one. There's this, in the business community in Chicago, we do a lot with sort of the emerging tech community. We recently co-sponsored with Chicago Innovation, a technology showcase that brought together actually Chicago entrepreneurs that were really blazing trails in things like virtual reality and virtual reality, augmented reality, and all kinds of things, consumer electronics. They all had won different sort of accolades and awards in our city, and so we brought them together to do our own version of a technology showcase in combination with Chicago Innovation, which sort of helped vet them. And it was a really fun way to elevate our reputation in Chicago as a leader in the tech space, but also do it in a really fun way to and to help profile some of the really great technology and tech companies in Chicago that are doing really exciting work. This is just a goofy thing for our summer programming. I'm not going to talk much about this. But I did want to end on one really exciting collaboration that's about space. We've, in Chicago, so before Chicago I was in San Francisco, and before San Francisco I was in Seattle, and in those two cities we passed major bonds, 200 million plus, to rebuild our neighborhood libraries. In Chicago, we don't do bonds like that, and so we have to piece our capital program together in a little more creative way. And so right now we have about a $250 million worth of either buildings that we've already completed or are committed over the next few years, and it's been pieced together in all these really fun and creative ways. One of the ways that we've done this is through the Chicago Housing Authority, and actually I have to give Mayor Emanuel a huge amount of credit for working with the Chicago Housing Authority to release its community benefit dollars to help us build public libraries. So in this case, we don't have to come up with the money. The Chicago Housing Authority is paying for it, and so we're putting new libraries on the ground floor of public housing in neighborhoods that don't have it, and above is public housing. And we did a design competition. There's going to be really beautiful, exciting, world-class design and architecture that will embed a new neighborhood library in communities that either had a raggedy old one before or a leased one, or in one neighborhood the library actually burned down. And so this is a really exciting opportunity for us. And then there is one lingering question, is will we have a library in the Obama Presidential Center? I spent the last 2 days actually at the inaugural summit that the people from all over the world and around the United States were brought together in Chicago to talk about the future of the Obama Presidential Center and a foundation. And what's really exciting about what they're doing is the idea is to build the next generation of civic leaders and activists and people who really care about the world. And as we've been working with the center on, as we do with all the different civic institutions in Chicago over the last couple of years, on how we might help them amplify their reach in Chicago through our network of libraries, they actually said, hey, what about us having a branch of the Chicago Public Library on the campus? And so we're exploring that partnership right now, and hopefully we have something exciting to announce down the road.
I just want to say I didn't know that when we asked Brian to talk about this, but that makes it so much more awesome than it already was. Thank you. Andrea?
Hi, I'm Andrea Blackman, and I'm with the Nashville Public Library. I bring you greetings from the It City, Nash Vegas, hot chicken capital of the world, Athens of the South, and about 25 other names that we call ourselves. I've been in Nashville for about 20 years, and I have yet to meet two people in the same place that are actual natives. And at my table, two people.
Seriously.
One was born in Nashville, and one lived there for several years. So go figure. Thank you, Library Journal, for this. This has never happened. I've been in Nashville for 20 years. I want to spend some time talking to you a little bit about a program and initiative that's in its second year, but its third iteration, and it's entitled A Civil Society. And it brings law enforcement officers together to have some tough conversations. I manage and curated the Civil Rights Room, which has been open for a little bit over 14 years at our downtown public library. And the room gives you an idea of what Nashville and our country was like after the Brown v. Board decision, looking at our city's response to Brown, how we desegregated our schools. The room continues to give you this chronology of lunch counter demonstrations, sit-ins, freedom rides, and end with the beautiful quote of Congressman Lewis on the wall. And so the goal initially, our police chief approached us because we've been having public programs and dialogues for decades around what is our next civil rights issue. So our police chief approached us and said, well, we would like all of our new recruits to take your history course. Okay, sure, we offer history courses at our public library. We actually do. So we developed 2 undergraduate courses with 2 local universities, a history course using the library as the classroom, using the library's resources. I also manage special collections, so when Dr. Hayden was talking about all the stuff, I keep my white gloves with me at all times, so I love the stuff. So we decided to offer this history course to our local recruits. Now, you can see from the photo, I had no experience with local law enforcement nor the military. I had no idea that our police recruits were in this military state with shaved heads, marching in all blue, answering questions, yes ma'am, yes ma'am. That was not the intent of the program. The program was to bring them together to have productive, deliberate conversations around this idea of post-racial, post-Obama, post-Trayvon Martin. And you can't do that by saying, yes ma'am, yes ma'am. So the first thing we did was ask the police chief, could you please leave the room? all of your trainers, and entrust us, yes, these awesome librarians, with your 62 police recruits. And they did. So we had immediate buy-in from our police chief. And so our police chief, he made his speech and he told the recruits that this is important for them. He wanted them to learn the history. Again, only a single-digit percentage of these new recruits are from Nashville. So they had no idea Nashville's history, its rich roots, and leading every major movement of our time. So the goal was really for the police department to just learn some history about the city that they will be serving in. But we saw this as an opportunity. Okay, let's experiment just a little bit, right? So we got, you know, I told my table my background is in education. So before I walked into the public library, I had a lot of fun teaching K through 12 and higher ed. So I thought this would be a great social experiment to bring law enforcement, future law enforcement officers together and show them images of law enforcement in 1960. And let's just start there. Let's see what happens if we ask them the question, what did our police department, how did they respond during an uprising in 1960, and would you respond the same way today? I should say that we started this program 2 years ago, but it's been in my brain for about 5 years. And so you have Trayvon Martin, you have Eric Garner, you have Sandra Bland, you have all of these things that are going on in our country, and we decided let's do it with our police department. We brought them in, we used an adult learning model, we asked Socratic method questions, we made them sit down and look at these photos and tell us what is going on, what do you think is happening, making presumptions and assumptions, and we taught them how to not say, I don't see color, I don't see black and white, I only see blue. Without saying, this is an unconscious bias training course. That was our goal, right? So all along, we agreed with the chief and said, yes, this is a history class, History 101. Come in and learn Nashville. And you can see the police recruits there actually digging into those photos. The great thing about our library and our system is that we have in our special collections all of these primary sources. We have hundreds of interviews from people like John Lewis and Diane Nash and Jim Bevel. We have the pins that the White Citizens Council carried around that said, keep our white schools white. We had the police chief's response and Billy Club from 1960 that we put out on the table for our newest police recruits. And so we asked them, you determine what role will you play in this idea of creating a civil society. We were intentional and we were deliberate in how we shaped our program. But there were some challenges, right? Lots of challenges. Because what happens when you ask yourself as an institution, how far are you willing to go to push the envelope? What happens when the police department want to change direction? What happens when it becomes too tough for your staff to lead these conversations and facilitate with 60+ people ideas that are steeped heavily in systemic racism? And how do we prepare librarians for that, right? Because most people who work in a public library are not steeped in curriculum development, had not been trained in how to foster these conversations. And so we were a perfect storm because we have a team of curriculum developers, we have educators, we have curators, we have librarians within our department. So it was perfect for us. And we had the buy-in of our mayor, we had the buy-in of our police chief, and we had the buy-in of our library system all together. What became evident for us as the years, now we're in year 2 of this, is that people outside of the police department, Nashville citizens we want to be a part of this police training. Is there any way that you can open your doors and teach us? Our mayor had decided to launch a new pilot called Race Talks. And so we talk about these great partnerships and knowing your role. We decided to step back and let our mayor lead her community conversations. We didn't want our program to get mixed up with just yet another diversity training within our city. So we let the mayor have her diversity talks. We let the police chief meet with all the other major chiefs of the city, and we sat back and we watched how the city was handling everything that was unfolding in front of us. And so one of the things that we found is that as you look at the photos, our new recruits, only 13% of the new recruits are people of color, and a smaller number of that are women. And what we found is that people who supported our program with the police were not the African American community, particularly the middle age male African-American community in Nashville. So we were trying to figure out who are we missing and why do they not want to come to the table to replicate and have this conversation around policing, police profiling in our city. And so we had to dig deep and ask those very, very tough questions and prepared ourselves. One of the things that we found is that most of our communities, I'll say North Nashville, didn't trust the police. And so when you have, you talked about branding, when you have the police's logo on a program that you're sponsoring and half of the community do not support your program, what do you do? So we decided that we would not abandon the integrity of our program, even if it means removing the police's logo off. Because again, it's a history class for them, but for us, it's a committed, deliberate, conscious program series that we are committed to. And we had to make those tough choices. So we pulled our PR marketing team together, we rebranded and called ourselves Civil Society without the part that was in after the colon, training for law enforcement. So we just said we're a civil society and we are offering these deliberate conversations for law enforcement and beyond. And so when I said we're a year 2, but iteration 3, we decided to recruit some more curriculum developers. We have taken our program to thousands of law enforcement officers around the state of Tennessee. So our TBI, Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, the director said, well, if Metro Police are going through this, then we want all of our law enforcement officers throughout the entire state of Tennessee. And so he bussed them in East, West, and Middle Tennessee, and we provide this course in this 4-hour intensive training with every commission agent throughout the entire state of Tennessee. But we decided, so that's great, yeah, that's really, really good, but this idea of creating a civil society is not just with the police department. So we took our program into schools, K through 12. We developed syllabi, curriculum for higher ed, corporate Fortune 500 companies, HCA, JP Morgan, Chase, and now in iteration 3, we are creating a model that can travel to other libraries. So we're very excited about replicating this in your library. We received funding from the Nissan Foundation, which was founded 25 years ago after the Rodney King uprising, to give communities an opportunity to talk about policing. And so because of that funding, we're able to replicate this program in any public or private library or academic institution that is willing to have us.
Thank you so much. We have about 15 minutes. I have a couple questions for the panel, and then we'll open it up to everyone. So I guess I have paired questions for Mike and for Brian. So for Mike, what is the most unlibrary-like thing you've ever asked the library to help with? And Brian, what is the most unlibrary-like thing that Rahm Emanuel has ever asked you to help with?
We've asked them to manage stormwater, so I think we have, we have 48 neighborhood libraries, and they're sort of, a lot of them are connected to parks and have their own sort of open space associated with it. We have one of the most innovative stormwater management programs in the world, and our staff's gone all over the world to talk about it, and we're managing not through pipes, we're managing green, we're not managing gray. So public space is a primary tool for managing stormwater runoff, which is part of the Clean Water Act from, I think, 1978. Somebody might know better than me, but it was in the 70s, and we're still working on the meeting the regulations. So sounds pretty crazy, but it's working pretty well.
You know, one of the things I think is interesting about that question relates to Mayor Emanuel is that he really gets libraries. And I think that when he came into office, he would say himself he probably needed to learn a little bit more about what public libraries really do. But I think one of the things, like out of the gate, like the very first thing that he asked me to look at was the summer. And he said, you know, I've been hearing about this thing called the summer slide. I'm trying to work on our education strategy. I don't quite know what it is, but I feel like the libraries, you know, you're doing all these great programs, but is there a way that we could lean into that? Is there a way we could have deeper impact in the summer and really challenging us to think in a more creative way about how we engage our kids in what was then a summer reading program and is now a summer learning challenge, really launched us off on a whole new initiative to think about how do we engage in kids in learning in summer? What does the research really say about what makes sense in terms of combating the summer slide? And actually, frankly, that led us on a path to completely rethinking how we do summer. So obviously, reading is an important part of our summer programming, but so is science-based. Actually, that's one of our partnership slides. You saw science-based learning through the Museum of Science and Industry, and getting kids out and exploring the city, credentialing that learning, and actually helping track that learning. And what we found actually as a result of this particular program is now kids are participating, since we're actually tracking the learning, we're able to do really sophisticated analysis by participant, and we've grown the program from 50,000 kids to over 100,000 kids this last summer. But we can actually show now that at the end of the summer, not only are we looking at combating the summer slide, but we're actually seeing real gains in reading scores and in math and science scores across the board, controlling for just about everything you control for in terms of family structure, makeup, economic elements, where kids are in the city. And I think that, so for me, in some ways, the way I would answer that question is what I appreciate about working with Emmanuel within libraries is I think he really gets the core part of our mission. And but he is never short in ideas and pushing us to think about our mission in new and creative ways.
Great. Andrea? Sorry, Andrea. I know it's pretty new still, so it's okay if you don't have an answer for this, but has this program changed how your libraries relate to the police force and the police force relates to the libraries in other ways beyond the class?
Sure. That's a good question. First of all, I think all of our public officials, all of our police chief and all the lieutenant chiefs, now they have library cards. So that was a plus for us, right? There you go. Woohoo! We're trying to get there. We're trying to get there, yeah. Like, that's a start.
For sure.
And that's all we can measure right now, with the exception of the accountability. So I would say what was important for us is that we would not set the racial agenda for our program. And I don't think the police department should set that either. And so this partnership has helped the police see that this is bigger than just them. This idea that we all will tackle and come up with this vaccine for racial injustice and policing in our city is on their forefront as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you in general to Mike, Brian, and Andrea. We've learned a lot.